So the war is over. Hitler committed suicide, and now it's kind of like the question: what happens next? So you have all these atrocities from the Holocaust, um, death camps, mass graves, ovens, just horrible, horrible, horrible atrocities. And what do? So they were, the Nazis were arrested. They were put on trial, and those trials were called the Nuremberg trials, and that was the final document um, in your DBQ packet that showed a lot of the higher ups, getting their death sentences, and you were usually death by hanging because that's what a common criminal would have. And there were four main uh, crimes that they were put on trial for, and you see before you: conspiracy, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and membership of a criminal organization. Now, clearly, all did not carry a death sentence. Some got sentenced to prison. Some didn't get any punishment. Like they were released. So it all just varied. And if you do a Google search of the Nuremberg trials, you can read more about it. So now the trials were held all throughout Germany. It wasn't just in Nuremberg, but just to give you an idea where Nuremberg is, it's right here. Okay, and here's Munich, where the Munich conference happened, and Berlin is up here. Dresden is going to get completely destroyed by the Soviets. It's actually, just it got reduced to nothing but rubble. So here you have Nazi war criminals under high constant surveillance. One person's assigned to each cell to make sure that nothing bad happens. They don't commit suicide or anything. And this is one of the trials. So a bunch of people would be on trial at the same time if the crime was the same, or if it was for the same event or the same crime. You have the prosecutors over here, the judges are up here, and you're going to notice some of them have headsets on, and it's because they were done in multiple languages. And here you have the solid dots represent the select sites of war criminal trials. So they were held all over Europe, with, of course, Nuremberg being the biggest one. Now, they did not all happen quickly, because some Nazis escaped Germany. Many fled to Argentina. Argentina was a big receiver of escaped Nazis. And Adolf Eichmann, who was a major, guy in charge of crimes against humanity, was arrested in Argentina. He was brought back to Israel, where he was tried and executed in 1962. So you see him there behind bulletproof glass to make sure no one killed him before his trial was over and he could be executed according to the law. So that ends the whole, war in Europe. But now we move over to Japan, where the war in the Pacific is still occurring. The war with Japan was just brutal. I guess there's no war that's not brutal, but this was a different kind of war than the war that was being fought in Europe. The topography was much different, and the enemy was much different. And by the time the war was over in Europe by mid-1945, the United States had successfully island hopped and liberated a lot of the Japanese Empire, and consequently destroyed a huge part of the Japanese Navy and Air Force. But Japan still had 2 million men in their army, and they had an entire population of people who were preparing for total war. So what we were trying to avoid was a ground invasion of the archipelago of Japan. We had bombed parts of Japan. We had flown over, dropped bombs, landed in China, and ran those missions. But we did not actually invade Japan. And had we done that, that would have been such a costly thing to do, both in American lives and resources. But we had this new technology. And through the Manhattan Project, we developed a brand new weapon of mass destruction. One bomb that could unleash a huge, huge, huge arsenal of power in just one bomb. And what you see before you is one of the first successful tests. I want you to know that this picture was taken at midnight. It was in the middle of the night. It was pitch black, but the light that was created from the bomb makes it look like it was shot in the middle of the day. And people would go and watch these tests done. A lot of them were done in the deserts out in the southwest. And actually, one of my former students that I taught in Beacon told me about her grandmother, who still received a check from the U.S. government because her grandfather would go watch the testing of the atomic bombs, and he got radiation poisoning and he died because they didn't know that wasn't effective. That effect comes out later. So the first bomb that was dropped was Fat Man. It was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan, on August 6, 1945, and instantly 70,000 people were killed. And quite honestly, they were the lucky ones, the ones that had survived or were injured. That was a pretty brutal survival. 4 square miles get completely destroyed. So this is a model. This is clearly not what it actually looked like, but this was the ground zero. This was the target. If you're flying in an aerial view, this makes a nice, bullseye for you to aim for. And then that's what it looked like after. Just totally destroyed. These buildings were earthquake proof, and they were able to withstand some of the impact. Clearly not the fireball that ensued afterward, but they withstood some of the impact. Because that's probably the most devastating part of any nuclear bomb, but it was atomic bomb back then. The firestorm, yes, but it was the shock wave. The shock wave that hits you before the firebomb hits you. And that's what just leveled everything in its path. Unless, of course, it was, somewhat earthquake proof. Just, you can see a car here. Just because then the fireball that ensued, what wasn't knocked over, just burned. And because of that flash of light, that really bright light, that made that other picture look like it was the middle of the day when it was really midnight, you get a negative effect here. And those of you who take black and white photography, on a negative, what was light is actually dark, and what's dark was light. So here, these lines here, these were the shadows of the fence post. So they look light now because they were protected from the flashlight of the bomb. And then you have the dark areas here that's like scorched from the flash of light. And you can barely make out here, but there's a light shadow here of a person that was standing. So that person's shadow is light here on this road because it blocked that piece of road from that bright light. People's clothes burned onto their skin, and not even because of the firestorm, but because of that flash of light. It's just some of these pictures are pretty brutal, so you can just fast forward. I mean, that's a boy. He has no skin left on his back. A lot of people actually just turned to carbon with that amount of heat. So you can see this woman's not necessarily charred from being burned. She actually started to turn to carbon because of the intense heat from the bomb. So that building right there is the museum today for the Hiroshima attacks. And a lot of Americans go to this museum, just like a lot of Japanese go to the USS Arizona Memorial. When my husband, sister, and brother-in-law went there, we were among really the minority of visitors. It was a lot of Japanese tourists who were there. I just, it's paying respect. It was a very, respectful visit. But I would want to go to this museum. I'd want to see the devastation and the memorial that was left, even though we caused it. Just another angle. So, as I said to you guys in class, we warned Japan. We told them, listen, we're going to destroy your cities. We're going to, you know, wave upon you this destruction you've never seen before. And Japan just kind of said, well, we'll see it coming and we'll be ready for you. They thought that if we were going to destroy an entire city, it would be through carpet bombing, you know, just flying over and dropping a whole bunch of bombs, which would show a whole bunch of planes, and you see that on radar. But when the Enola Gay, which was the plane that dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima, it was with two other planes, you know, one taking video, and I think one was like a weather plane. And then you had the Enola Gay. So they really didn't pay much mind to just three planes. They never knew it was just going to be one bomb. And Hiroshima, if I can go back, Hiroshima was chosen on purpose because it was a city that we didn't touch. We didn't bomb it. It was left alone. So this way we can actually fully measure the damage this one bomb would do. So it was on purpose. And there was also a military base nearby. So it wasn't like we were just attacking civilians. And it was a state of total war, so even civilians could be justifiable targets. So we told Japan that, listen, we're going to bomb you, and we did. And then they still didn't surrender after the August 6th attack. And we bombed them again on August 9th. We dropped another bomb in Nagasaki, another relatively untouched city, so we can assess the damage. The topography of Nagasaki, though, it's really in the valley of a whole bunch of mountains, so the damage wasn't as extensive because of the topography keeping it kind of contained. So 40,000 were killed by this explosion. One explosion, 40,000 people. And we said to Japan, you keep delaying your surrender, we're going to keep destroying another one of your cities. You know, every day you don't surrender, we're going to attack you. And luckily they surrendered because we only had 2 bombs that were ready to go. So if they had waited out another, you know, if they expected us to bomb a third city, they totally would have called our bluff. But luckily that didn't happen, and a whole bunch of lives on both sides were saved. So that was at ground level. Forgive me, I don't know how this photo was taken. I don't know the circumstances, you know, how someone happened to have a camera at the moment where you have the mushroom cloud starting to form over Nagasaki. But a photo was captured. And just shows you on the archipelago where Hiroshima and Nagasaki are. So that led to victory in Japan. So September 2nd is officially VJ Day. The peace treaty was signed on the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The USS Missouri is currently docked in Hawaii. You can take a tour of it. I didn't, but you can. And World War II is over, and everybody was happy. It was just this glorious, glorious day in the United States. Like, really, it was done. It was over. Our boys were coming home. This guy right here is Emperor Hirohito. Now, you guys know the stories about the Japanese emperors. They were kept in seclusion. They were very, you know, considered to be gods. And here he was signing the unconditional surrender to the Americans aboard a U.S. ship. And so a lot of people realized that, wow, maybe our emperor is not a god. And it was like this devastating blow to the Japanese, one they just lost, and to this realization that their emperor is just a human being like the rest of them. So this question is on the Regents exam, and there's no context. There's no context. This is just what they print. It says, you know, you can take the time to read it. You know, you could pause it because I'm on a limited amount of time here with these 15 minutes. But, you know, clearly, you know, it's the defeat of the Japanese in World War II. It's choice 2. But, you know, on the Regents exam with no context, you have to remember that the emperor was considered to be a god. Most people in Japan didn't know, like, ever hear his voice before. They would not have seen him on TV because that wasn't really happening yet. So it was an epic defeat for Japan. And that concludes the World War II overview. If you have any questions, you can always stay after. You can email me and Mrs. Villegas, or Mrs. Villegas, I should say.